Anime gets a lot of slack for the way they portray their female characters. Predominantly the excessive use of meaningless fan service. A lot of the times, the usage of fan service creates this uncomfortable feeling when you realize that what you're watching in that scene is less meaningful and more just to cater to an unhealthy male gaze. It makes it feel like this character, due to the nature of her being a woman, must be sexualized to the audience because of her attractive physical features without much other purpose than to arouse the audience, which in shonen is predominantly male. I can see the merit for including these scenes when they genuinely serve the story. If the nudity shown portrays the vulnerability of the character or exposes some important elements of the character that they only keep to themselves in their most private moments. However, as a whole, the usage of fan service is usually superfluous to the main themes and messages of the story and doesn't add much to the characterization of the female characters. Overall, the most common use of fan service is an excuse to simply draw lewd, objectifying depictions of the female character that seldom help improve the character in any way. At best, the portrayal can get a laugh or two or show the character's inner thoughts in their private moments. At worst, the scene reduces the character to simply being eye candy and serve no purpose outside of attracting attention with their alluring, exaggerated sexual characteristics. Naturally, I want to say that art is art. If a female character's only purpose in the story can be summed up by her body proportions, then the author has every right to do so. Unfortunately, I can see ways that this trope or style in which women are portrayed in anime can infect the culture and affect the way the anime community views women. If too much of the anime culture is oversaturated with female characters who are constantly objectified, what does that say about how women are viewed in the real world? Explicit gags, fan service moments, and exaggerated proportions by themselves in an anime don't make someone automatically engaged in the objectification of women. However, think of it like a death by a thousand cuts situation. The more women you see being portrayed as a piece of meat to gawk at over and over, the more normalized it can get. Young and impressionable anime viewers could potentially get it in their minds, either consciously or subconsciously, that this blatant objectification is the norm. Worst of all, the majority of the usage of female sexuality can get quite boring. It's redundant and doesn't take the character into any unique paths. I get that it's ingrained in the culture by this point and we can't divorce over-sexualized depictions of female characters from the shonen genre. I just really wish that there was a story that used female characters and their sexuality to advance the plot, themes, and messages in an interesting way. If only there was a show like that. Oh wait, on its surface, Chainsaw Man is a story about a young man looking to achieve his perverted dream of touching a woman's breasts. What the story is really about is a traumatized child looking for affection from multiple women who take advantage of him in every way possible, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and whatever power did. Denji's story is intrinsically tied to his relationship with the women in his life, so therefore, each prominent female character in the story is sexualized or objectified in some way. However, Tatsuki Fujimoto is better than most at writing female sexuality as a form of characterization and thematic messaging. While the story feels like it heavily objectifies women, Chainsaw Man has a lot to say about female sexuality and subverts a lot of the shallow fan service tropes that we are inundated with in anime. Let's look at the four main women in Chainsaw Man Season 1. Kobeni's whole MO is that she is a scared, frightened girl who wears a suit, doesn't show any overtly sexual characteristics, and has a panic attack at the slightest inconvenience. How does someone like her subvert the way women use sexuality in anime? By completely refusing to be sexual in any way. To Kobeni, her sexuality is so sacred to her that she would rather risk her own life every single day than to let it be exploited by somebody else, since those were the two paths of employment for her. We learned that Kobeni was given a choice between fighting devils or becoming a sex worker, of which she chose the latter to preserve her sexual autonomy. This shows in her outfit, which is the same public safety suit that the other devil hunters wear with no altercations to show off her body. The same goes for her casual outfit, which is a modest look that in no way portrays her in a sexual lens. Kobeni does not want to be sexualized, therefore Fujimoto does not sexualize her. In this way, Kobeni's refusal to present her sexuality to the public is a form of her taking control of her own body and her own life. This can also be why she refuses to share her devil contract with the other devil hunters or even the reader. Some things are private, and both Kobeni's secrets and her sexuality are hers to keep to herself. Considering how messed up her life already is, I think she deserves a little bit of control over at least one aspect of it. Even though Kobeni's life is out of control and she suffers a lot in the anime and even more so in the manga, she never loses autonomy over the one part of herself that she can still control, her sexuality. Which, if you know what happens to Kobeni, you'll know that she has very little control over her life. It's like Fujimoto is playing this sadistic little game of Sims and choosing to pick on her specifically for no reason. Kobeni's choice to keep her sexuality to herself could also be seen as commentary on how a lot of female sex workers enter the industry because they wanted to regain control of their own sexuality, rather than just letting others objectify them. Kobeni is doing the same thing, except she's doing it by refusing to become a sex worker, instead risking her life as a devil hunter in order to maintain her sexual autonomy. Both are ways that women react to a world that constantly tries to objectify and sexualize them, and both ways of doing so are valid. I think we're all at a point where we can safely say that this scene was a very well animated scene of a young boy getting taken advantage of sexually, right? This was a 23-year-old woman using her sexuality to coerce an impressionable 16-year-old child who was one of her underlings into a sexual encounter that he was not ready for. It also happened moments after she engaged in a non-consensual kiss with the same child in which more than enough bodily fluids were exchanged. I realized that age of consent laws work differently in Japan, but even Himeno herself said she would get into trouble if they did end up doing something. Hey, I never said that these women subverted sexual objectification by doing morally righteous things. The reader is supposed to see Himeno as sexually desirable given how she's portrayed, since we're seeing the story through Denji's eyes. She offers up a kiss to motivate her subordinates, showing how loosely she covets her sexuality. To her, sexuality is fun and free to use at her own discretion to gain pleasure, even if it is at the detriment of others. Himeno uses the pleasure she gains from her sexuality to distract herself from the ongoing tragic reality of being a devil hunter. Much like drinking or smoking, sex is simply another vice that she indulges in excess in order to make her short life in this profession feel less horrifying. Himeno is scared and traumatized, and this is how she copes with that fear. Her sexuality is a comfort to her. This wanton use of her sexuality combined with her excessive alcohol use caused her to disregard the immoral implications of sleeping with an underage subordinate. This was an encounter that was always meant to be disturbing, but portrayed as sexually arousing and alluring because, well, all Denji sees is a sexy older woman wanting to give him the sexual pleasure that he thinks that he wants. However, their intimacy begins with the vomit scene. This already paints the whole encounter as something revolting, something that makes you sick, and that these two getting together was not an appropriate thing to happen. Despite that, Himeno continues to selfishly use her sexuality to seek her own pleasure at the cost of Denji's innocence. While Himeno does ask for consent before actually engaging in intercourse, by that point she had already violated him without consent multiple times, and he was in a position where he's pressured to say yes due to her being older and his superior. Even if she was drunk and regretted her actions the next day, Himeno still used her sexuality to take advantage of this child who is still barely learning about the world. I think that the scene where Himeno assaults Denji, and yes, I'll be calling it that because that's what it is, was purposefully made both alluring and disgusting to show the cognitive dissonance that comes with watching this situation. We know that it's morally wrong, but from Denji's naive perspective at the moment, we see it as pleasurable or what is expected of a heterosexual male. It would be hard to put two characters in this position without making them an older woman taking advantage of a younger man. It's very reminiscent of those stories where female teachers are caught taking advantage of their young male students and the public and even news reporters downplaying the crime committed by an older female to a younger male. Needless to say, the public reaction to these stories and to the Himeno Denji scene would be so different if you flip the genders. Himeno uses her sexuality to indulge herself in pleasure while taking advantage of Denji. Rather than fighting against the objectification of her own body like Kobeni, Himeno is the one who objectifies herself the most. Her design also reflects this. Even her public safety uniform highlights her ample chest, which is the opposite of how Kobeni's uniform is designed. I don't need to say much about her other outfits as it's obvious her feminine assets are always in frame. To Himeno, her sexuality is one of the last things she has that gives her momentary relief. Its importance to her is the same as drinking or smoking is. It's just another thing to get through to the next day. This depressing realism of Himeno's sexuality adds a lot of depth to this already tragic character. Power as a cat. Sort of. She's essentially not a human, has no idea what it's like to live as a human, and refuses to engage in everything that a human stands for, which includes sexuality and hygiene. Due to her not being able to properly understand the human experience, the concept of sexuality in general is perplexing to her. She even wears breast pads to make her own chest seem bigger because she thinks it's neat, not for any sexual reasons. This doesn't stop her from recognizing that sexuality can be a useful tool. She does understand why Denji wants to touch breasts so much, but she gets that she's able to convince him to do things using her body as a bargaining chip. This is the way that power subverts the objectification of women in anime, by being completely neutral to the concept of sexuality. It won't demean her to objectify her because she doesn't care. We often forget that when we are watching Power, we aren't watching a girl. We are looking at a devil in the body of one. Because she's essentially a demon piloting the body of a dead girl, Power has a hard time understanding social interactions. When she offers her body to Denji, she doesn't stand to lose anything because to her, sexuality is meaningless. It was a contract that she simply had to fulfill. She gave her body to Denji the same way she would give up her last cookie for him. It was a thing that she had that she could give to him to make him do something that she wants. She doesn't hold her body and sexuality to any regard because she isn't human, and knowing Power, she would rather give up her body than her last cookie. Unlike Kobeni, Power doesn't hold her sexuality sacred, and unlike Himeno, she doesn't get any pleasure out of using her sexuality. The Denji bargain was a completely neutral exchange for her, and the only pleasure she got out of it was getting to mess with Denji. This detached mentality she has to sex and sexuality can be seen in Power and Denji's reactions in the bathroom scene. This is Denji's first sexual experience with a girl, and he's shaking, sweating, and freaking out. Power, on the other hand, is enjoying the power that she has over this puny human, and doesn't care that she is giving herself sexually to another person. She even plays up the part by imitating erotic noises to simulate what she thinks this sexual experience would be like because she thinks it's funny. Power's lack of humanity allows her to view her own sexuality in an objective and neutral way, and the only time we are drawn to it is when she is using it as a tool to get something she wants. But what happens when someone, like Power, also views her own sexuality objectively, but is able to wield it with much more deliberate and sinister intent? Like Kobeni, Makima has complete control of her sexuality. She can withhold it if she wants to, as we see her sometimes in a large jacket that hides her frame, or she can put it on full display, like Himeno, albeit in a more subtle way. A glance, a soft whisper, a small gesture, or a facial expression shift can all convey how Makima seduces you. Much like Power, Makima views sexuality as an objective aspect of the body that she has. It's another tool in her massive tool set of abilities that she can use to get what she wants. I'll try my best to keep this analysis of Makima strictly to what we see in the anime and avoid manga spoilers. Makima is never not in control of the situation. Even if she doesn't raise her voice or assert herself, her mere presence demands your attention. Her authority is absolute, and she doesn't even have to lift a finger. This is just who she is. One of the ways in which she commands this authority is how she uses her sexuality to manipulate Denji. Like Himeno, she lets Denji, and subsequently the audience, objectify her, hence the scenes where we see her body more prominently. However, unlike Himeno, who always lets her sexuality out as a form of escapism, Makima only lets us objectify her in controlled doses, always to accomplish a goal. While the other women I've talked about use their sexuality in a physical context, with Kobeni hiding her body, Himeno flaunting her body, and Power using her body as a bargaining chip, Makima's every movement and interaction is used in conjunction with her body to seduce you. She catches our attention with her body, and then we are drawn in by her gaze, comforted by her voice. Then, once her hand brushes on our skin, it feels warm and natural. All of our senses are overwhelmed by this one woman. Reality melts as she used her sexuality to slither into our minds and erase our perception of time until there was nothing in the world left but her. And before we know it, our hand is on her chest. It's as if you blacked out. Once her spell over you has been broken and you're shot back into reality, you realize that you have no memory of the past few moments. You only have the imprint of her touch burned into your brain. This is what Denji went through. He doesn't even realize that he had once again been taken advantage of. That once again, a woman has forced herself onto him sexually without his consent. Except this time, there's no repugnance like with Himeno and no dissatisfaction like with Power. Makima is so effective at using her sexuality as a tool of manipulation that she seemingly reaches out into the screen and tries to pull us, the viewer or reader, into her seductive gaze as well. Denji feels genuine affection from this interaction, but Makima? She just drip fed him what he wanted. Cold and calculating, she fully utilized her sexuality to get what she wanted, and she was so effective at it that she cemented her place in his heart forever. She teased him with a glimpse of the intimacy she knows he wants, knowing that now he would do whatever she wants, whenever she wants it, without question. Totally under her control. There is so much more to Makima's character I'd love to go into, but it would drag on too long and it would require me to spoil the manga. I hope that I conveyed how Makima takes the trope of female objectification in anime and uses it to invade our minds. She is completely aware that sexuality is one of the best weapons in a woman's arsenal. She can use it with devastating efficiency, and her use of said sexuality goes beyond simple objectification of the female form. She is terrifying, feminine, and sexualized appropriately for the sake of advancing her character as well as the plot. I personally think she's a perfect subversion of the sexualized female anime character. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it gave you guys some insight on my perspective of how female characters are portrayed in anime, and I just wanted to gush about Chainsaw Man because I really love the way that Tatsuki Fujimoto writes his female characters. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and if this video gets enough views, maybe I'll do a part 2 with the rest of the female characters yet to appear in Chainsaw Man. Comment down below who's your favorite female character in Chainsaw Man. Be sure to like and subscribe for more lukewarm takes, and I'll see you next time.